Let's get through this and see where we're at.
Dr. Curtis?
Yes.
No, we didn't go over this part.
Oh, good. Thank you. Okay, so this is where we're at. Okay. Okay. All right. So we've talked about, I think, about the assessment and the resistance to drug and alcohol treatment and everything else. And so let's talk about the physical consequences of alcohol and drug use, because uh, so I often talk about in my psychology classes about how physical appearance, emotions, how people emote towards others, and everything are telltale signs about the health and condition of another person. So, a lot of times we can tell a lot about another person by their behaviors, but we need to be careful of these type of assessments. Okay. So what we're going to do is go through the physical consequences of alcohol and abuse. But I also want to note along this journey about other potential avenues that you need to maybe look at. Okay. Okay. So we're going to talk about the physical consequences of alcohol and drug use. And probably uh, one of the most severe symptoms that we can think about is convulsions and loss of consciousness. And this is when a person is taken to the ER. Usually they're assessed, they're put in for that 24, 36-hour watch period, depending upon the state that you're in. And then usually they're assessed to go into another rehabilitation system. Okay. And when we talk about convulsions with loss of consciousness, what we're talking about is individuals who are not there. Okay. So I want you to think about, I think the best example is like, I'm trying to think of a good example. I'm trying to, I'm thinking of an example of when, help me with this class, when you think of someone who is convulsing, so convulsion is throw up, they're gagging, they're can't control their bodily functions, but they also are not there. They're almost asleep. They're tired. Um, can we think of an example of this? I'm having a hard time. I'm being honest with you guys because I can see it because I've seen it before.
You, um, Doctor, do you mean like someone that we've seen, or do you mean like
Yeah,
an
yeah.
example of, well,
An example or someone you have seen.
so a cousin of mine has those grand mal seizures, and like you said, it's like he's there but not there, but biting his tongue, foaming at the mouth, losing control of his body, and that's scary, you know. Um, because they don't have any control, and like you said, and they don't know what's really going on. Like you said, it's like they're there but they're not there. That's the only thing I've witnessed.
I think that is the best example is someone with a seizure disorder,
Isn't
with
that
severe
called,
drug disorder. I'm sorry, go ahead.
isn't that called delirium tremens, DTs.
That is another term. Can you explain that?
Yeah, Vicky explained it. I seen someone do that as well, biting their tongue, um, having a seizure, and um, when they overcome it, they it's kind of hard to explain. They're like not really knowing where they're at, and their memory will come back slowly.
Exactly. Yes,
So,
yes.
They're confused and
yeah, they're confused.
unaware of what's going on or what happened.
Hmm. And and
Well,
so and so we can translate that into substance use, right? Because substances can create those same things that psychotic or convulsion or Parkinson's diseases can uh, um, create, right? And so, hey, Teddy, you have your hand up. Let's stop right here. Let Teddy, what's
Oh
going
yeah,
on?
I was just gonna add one of the best, I had a sober friend that had epilepsy also, so he would have times where he'd actually fall down and have convulsions, and he would wake up and not know where he was at. I mean, it just never even got better with him due to this epilepsy. I mean, even being 10 years sober, he had that a lot. So that was an example that I was thinking of that I wanted to just add in on there. So that's probably one of the ones that I've seen that looks the closest to what substances do to people.
Yeah, Teddy, I think that's an excellent example, and it is an example of even 10 years sober and whatnot, that it's an example of what things can accelerate, right? So when we think about different disorders, just because someone overcomes something, it can accelerate different disorders, as Teddy mentioned. It right, and that's an example of that type of situation. And so these lists, they work on the same mechanisms as other disorders, as Teddy mentioned, and they can create the same thing. And then, even 10 years after, because it was accelerated, it can create those same symptomologies. Thank you, Teddy. That's a great example. I saw another hand up. Who
that
raised
that
their
was
hand?
that was me, Dr. Newkirk. I the other example I can think of that was in the media was River Phoenix when they said he died outside of the Viper Club when he was convulsing and everything. That was due to drug and alcohol, and he died
Mm-hmm.
right there.
Mm-hmm. And Vicky, you bring up a great example with that example, because the issue with especially alcohol, when you combined it with a stimulant, so you have a depressant and then you have a stimulant. One is trying to contract your vessels, your blood vessels to your heart. That is the alcohol. And then you have a stimulant that is trying to pump it open. And so you get this constant, inconsistent, artificial pumping and contraction that then sends your heart electrically into what is called cardiac arrest. And so that's an excellent example of how alcohol and drugs can compound an issue of an individual, because he probably already was genetically predisposed to heart disorder, but then the alcohol and drug accelerated that, and it pushed it beyond that limit. And that's the issues with drug and alcohol, is that it accelerates a lot of disorder. And that issue, does that, Vicky, does add to your.
Yeah, that clarifies more for me. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't think of that. But thank you.
Yeah. Mhm. I saw someone who, and I didn't catch it, came up.
You're cutting out a little bit for me. I don't know if
Don't
it's
be.
everyone else, but
I
you're
was just gonna say that. You're
Me
cutting
too.
out
I
really
thought I
good,
was
and I
tripping.
can't
I'm
hear you.
like,
Yeah.
Same here.
Hello?
Who's trip? I'm
yeah,
just
you're still cutting out.
The
Yeah.
rapture's coming for you. I can't hear him. I don't know.
someone said they were tripping.
Oh, cool. He just got off of the live. He's not here no more.
oh yeah, just changed host. Uh-oh.
Oh, there you go.
Now he's back.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, everyone. My internet connection must be not so good.
You
Thought
sound
you
good
left.
now.
We thought you left us.
We
All right.
didn't hear the last
It-
5 minutes of that.
You missed 5 minutes. Oh my goodness, that was the best part of the semester. I don't know where we go from now.
oh my goodness.
Continue to
Anyways,
wait for the
okay, let's get.
rapture.
Okay, so everyone can hear me fine now.
Yes, now, yes.
We're okay. All right, all right, all right.
So I had a quick question.
Okay,
My hand was up and then I put my hand down.
okay.
Um, when a person after they get sober, they have these twitches, like, and it's just alcohol, but they have these uncontrollable, like, they blink extra hard, or it kind of gives off the same vibes of what somebody coming off of meth would go ahead and be. How does that work?
Okay, so this actually it's a very excellent question. And so have you guys seen the commercials for antidepressants and that uncontrollable body movement drug? I can't
I don't
remember what
watch
the
a
name.
lot of TV,
I've
so
seen them.
no.
All right. So
Isn't it tardic dyskinesia?
yes, there's the answer. So when we give our body an artificial stimulant, or whether it be prescribed like an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication, or whether it not be so legal, okay? Um, the body still responds to it, especially if the body, the drug that we were taking had to deal with the dopamine system, okay? Um, the dopamine system has a lot to do with the norepinephrine system. And the norepinephrine system deals with body muscle control. Okay. So if you've ever noticed, when we get excited, we uncontrollably do something. We raise our hand, we clap our hands, we say yay, we do something. That's the norepinephrine system that is taking over. That is saying we're so excited we have to physically do something about that. Okay. When we ignite that system artificially, such as with antidepressants, drugs, alcohol, any of those systems can be then be controlled by autonomic muscle contractions. Okay. So what happens is that when you become sober, though, is that so let's say you're taking a cocaine and it's operating on dopamine. We'll use that. Or alcohol that operates on opiate and dopamine systems. So let's do the alcohol because that's the most common. So as you become more severe and severe alcohol, you have uncontrolled twitches. So, for example, the next day when an alcoholic um, isn't drinking, they have the shakes. They have the uncontrollable. They can't type, they can't write, they can't do anything because their body is shaking so bad. That is the norepinephrine system that is operating because we triggered the dopamine pain centers of our brain. And so those systems remain overactive because it's assuming that the damage that was done is still there. So that system has to be overactive. And this is the same thing that happens when we take like antidepressants and we get that syndrome that someone mentioned. I'm so proud of you for mentioning it and whatnot, those uncontrollable twitches. Though that is the side effect of the dopamine norepinephrine system and how they antagonize each other. So as you're coming down from a drug that emphasizes dopamine and opioid system like alcohol, that other neural system is trying to compensate. And so they think that your body needs to be at this twitchy system because here you're lowering this system and this system is going, why are we doing this? And so, like with a lot of alcoholics who have uncontrollable shakes, a lot of opioid people who have uncontrollable movements. This is why, is because that substitute system that makes us so when we are extremely happy, makes us move, makes us dance, makes us do all of these joyful things. All it has is these neurons that are making our system twitch because that's all its ability to do is to make our system and our muscles physiologically twitch. And that's all its function is without guidance from those other areas that that drug was stimulating. Does that make sense? I want to make sure that that makes sense to everyone. That we have two systems, one that works on the motivational pain reduction system, and then we have one that works on the physiological system. And when those two systems are not in sync with each other, it can create those twitches because that other system doesn't know what that other system wants it to do. Does that make sense to
It
everyone?
does. Yes. Thank you for explaining that.
About how long, like, after does the
I-
twitching stop? Or is that just like a long lasting side effect?
So it depends on the substance. So with okay, and it depends on the severity of use. Okay, so for someone who is, for example, an alcoholic addict or a substance use addict, as we refer to them, it may, it depends on the severity and the amount of abuse they've used. But for example, this is the issue with alcohol. And I want to express this in this class at this point, at this very important point. Alcohol is the most dangerous substance to detox on. I know we've all heard about cigarettes and nicotine and all of those kinds of things. But if you have a severe alcoholic, like they've been using constantly, almost 24/7, they need to go to a hospital because coming down on alcohol can create such convulsions that it can kill the person. Right? So if you're recommending a long-term alcoholic cold turkey it, you better put them in the ER first. Because the convulsions are going to be so severe that it's probably going to kill them unless there's medical intervention. On other drugs that target very stimulant areas, so alcohol stimulates different, it stimulates the opiate areas, it stimulates the dopamine areas, and it stimulates the serotonin areas. But like cocaine, heroin, other different type of drugs that target one specific neurotransmitters, those convulsions can be reduced within 1 or 2 days. With severe users, it may be lifelong. People who have used over years, it will be a lifelong struggle. Um, for people who have used moderately, it can be a several year type of thing. Does that answer your question? I don't know if I did or not.
Yeah, it really did. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. So this convulsion issue is an issue because we always have to remember that there's always an antagonist to the neurotransmitter that we're stimulating with a drug. And usually that antagonist has to do with the muscular system, hence the shaking, hence the convulsions, hence all those things. With more other types of drugs that are snorted, we can see nasal snorting bleeding. We can see with things like things that are ingested through smoking, weed use, congestion, and wheezing. But these tend to be minor to most individuals. They're very correctable. Hepatitis and other liver issues tend to come from needle sharing, um, uh, and then the probably and severe and frequent headaches. The more a person uses, the more severe their frequent headaches when they try to quote unquote sober up. Okay, so the length of use is associated when someone is trying to be sober with a frequency of headaches and whatnot. So that's something to keep in mind. Dependent on the time of use, will determine the frequency of headaches. And that has to do with the constriction of blood vessels. Many of the drugs that are used, including alcohol, constrict blood vessels. And based upon, again, classical conditioning, through which I hope you all learned from Psych 101 and everything, our cells, our blood vessels are classically conditioned based upon what we put into our body to constrict or expand. Alcohol and all of these are constrictants. They constrict our blood vessels. So what our blood vessels learn is anytime we smoke something, we drink something, we inhale something, we eat something, we inject something, our vessels should restrict, meaning restrict blood flow to areas of the brain. And that's what creates these more severe headaches over time. Drug overdose requires treatment in emergency rooms and hospitals. And I think we all know that. And the thing that I want to emphasize is, especially with alcohol, if you have a alcoholic in your family and they overdose, do not keep them at home and put them in bed, because the probability that you will find them, and I'm going to put this in this class, and I hope it doesn't upset anyone, the probability that you'll find them in bed the next day dead multiplies by 5, meaning you're 500% more likely to find them dead the next morning. And that's the issue, especially with alcohol and overdose with alcohol. Don't think it's a joke. Don't think it's because it's legal. If they pass out or they overdose, they need to go to the emergency room. Okay. I just want to emphasize that point. Okay. So, some other physical consequences, coughing up black phlegm. This is especially with heroin and things that you ingest through the lung system. I will also emphasize with alcohol, black coughing up yellow phlegm. You do know what yellow phlegm, when you throw up in the morning after a hard nights of drinking and everything, you know what that is, don't you? How many know if you've drank heavily, if you cough up yellow phlegm, what does that mean? Does anybody know?
Isn't it you're dehydrated?
Nope.
Is it like your stomach acid?
Nope.
Okay.
Isn't it bile?
What's that?
Bile?
Yes. That is bile. That is, I'm going to put this in more, that is poop that your liver can't digest because of the alcohol.
From your mouth?
Yes, because your liver cannot digest it anymore. You are literally throwing up poop.
That
Think
is
about that
disgusting.
with people that you've known that have done that, who have coughed up. This black bile, it is very, especially with heroin, cocaine, everything else that has been an inhalant. That's a definite danger sign. But when we talk about alcohol and the phlegm is yellow, that is bile. That is stuff that is supposed to come out of the other end of your body, not the mouth. So kind of think about that when you know someone who has done that and whatnot. So severe weight loss, sinus problems, ulcers or other stomach problems, and heart palpitations. Um, and so one of the things, and this is an interesting thing that I want to note, is when I was diagnosed with heart disease, the very, 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 very first thing they asked me is how much do I drink? How much alcohol do I intake? And is there any other drugs that I ingest? Because the major leading cause of what I have, which is an enlarged left ventricle, which means that at any time my heart can explode and I'll be gone, to put it blunt, is because of alcohol use. And so think about this when you think about the people we're working with, what risk they're at and how much it can really destroy a person's life. And I just want you to kind of think about these things when it comes to the physical end of disease and disorder. Okay? All right, so let's talk about the psychological consequences of drugs and alcohol, and we'll finish with this today. Oh, okay. So you probably noted, if you've ever been around someone who has done alcohol, the irritability and short-temperedness. Okay. Why? So alcohol, I want you to think about this, operates on the dopamine and the pain centers of the brain. Okay. So what needs to be of attention when both your reward system but your pain system is being ignited. Okay. So I want you to imagine what would happen if you were in the middle of the street and a car all of a sudden came in the street and it was headed towards you at 120 miles per hour. Would you be happy and joyous and, oh my gosh, here's this car? Or would you be like irritable? Oh my God, I got to get out of here. And short-tempered, why is this person doing this? And would you instantly react? I'm hoping that in that situation, you would instantly react. But if you want to know why a lot of people who are on, especially alcohol and a few other drugs, become suddenly irritable and short-tempered, it's because that same car rushing towards them is the same thing that alcohol and drugs is doing to their brains. And so any comment that they find as destructive, offensive, or anything, even if you didn't mean it that way, maybe the car rushing towards you is an emergency car. They see you, they're going to go around you, they see a path around you. But because you can't see that, because of your neurological response, your sudden response is anger, short-temperedness, irrationality, because all of a sudden, all of those chemicals in your brain are already there. And I want you to consider that when a person, if you're going to work in the field of detox and they come in and they hate you and they're angry with you and they're pissed at you, and it's not about you, it's about that chemical that is rushing through their brain that is sending up these warning signals saying these people are the problem. You are that car racing towards them at 120 miles per hour. Okay. And then panic attacks, that's very common, especially in the later use of alcohol and drugs. I will tell you that even people in the beginning phases of drugs can experience this, dependent upon their physiological response. Violent thoughts. And this goes back, and I'm going to admit this. Well, I'm not going to admit this, but I'm just going to state it. This goes back to this stage. How do you protect yourself when you are in irritable, short-tempered, and you're in a panic state? What are you going to do? Are you going to be set back and go, everything's cool, I'm going to be okay? Or are you going to think, how do I protect myself? Severe depression, okay? Memory problems. I don't know if anyone here has experienced this with someone who is completely inebriated, but I remember telling my friend, you just said this. And they all of a sudden said, no, I didn't. You're making it up. Has anyone else experienced that experience with someone who is on a substance? You could put your hands up. You can say, no, no, no. Everyone in my life with, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of yeses, right? Okay. And then paranoia and suspicion. That is very common with any type of drug that we're dealing with. Because again, it goes back to most of these drugs are stimulant drugs, even the depressive ones, that put us in we need to be in a protective mode. We need to make sure that we're okay. All right, so let's then deal with suicidal thoughts. And I've been thinking about this in a lecture. in a lecture format about how do you make this personal with substance use. Because it is true that a lot of individuals who fully commit a suicide are under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And that cannot be denied. It if they're in alcohol, it reduces their inhibitions to do what their thoughts have been telling them to do. If you're using a stimulant, it makes you feel powerful enough to go through with the thoughts that you've already been having. And so when I've been looking at these lecture slides and how I should introduce suicidal thoughts, I want to make this very clear. Suicidal thoughts precede, consciously, subconsciously, or unconsciously, before substance use. An alcoholic just does not commit suicide. Someone high on heroin just does not just commit suicide. There are consequences of life events that they try to alleviate those thoughts with those substances, or try to alleviate the resistance to those thoughts of suicidality through substances. Okay? Um, Without disclosing too much about your professor, he was in the category that he relieved his suicidal thoughts to try and attempt by using substances to relieve those thoughts. Then I do know other people that I've worked with who had those thoughts and used substances to prevent them from not going through those thoughts. Nikki, you have your hand up.
I think, yeah, that happens. But then again, after you use, when you're withdrawing, those thoughts are even worse.
Yes, Nikki, they are. And that's why we have to have effective interventions, right? So
Yeah,
I
that's what
think,
I see like every day at work is we have to talk with them about all their suicidal thoughts because they just used.
mhm. And usually, Nikki, I'm going to give you the room to deny this or not, most of those individuals who use substances, they don't necessarily deny that they wanted to end their life,
They
right?
do not. No,
That
they will
was
tell you.
they use substances to allow them to do that.
Right.
Okay.
So
And
they
that's
thought it would just go away after the use, but it's even worse
mm,
after.
it's a it allows them to not resist it in a sense. Okay, so when it comes down to this last category, and this is a very tough category, especially when we're going to talk about prevention, all right? Because we have all heard the statistic about combat PTSD since the Iraq War, Afghan conflict, all of these things, and we've seen these both men and women come back. And we've seen this increase in suicide. Okay, the majority of them include alcohol or drug use. But this is an important perspective, and thank you, Nikki, for chiming in on this, is that this use has a large component to deal with thoughts that preceded that use. Okay. And so, I'll be honest with my attempt. I used alcohol to make it more easy for me to do what I needed to do. not to go into detail into your professor, but that's why I went into the research on this issue and everything else. But just to be completely honest and evident with all of you guys, long before I worked for TOCC and everything else, I knew I used substance to make it so I could do what I needed to do. And so suicidal thoughts often predate substance use. And that's a point I want to make. There are individuals who are in chronic substance use, poverty, all of those kind of dynamics, those social dynamics that does lead to that. But the mass majority is that substances are used to desensitize the individual for thoughts that they've already had for a very, very long period. And the reason why I bring this up in this class is this is a prevention strategy class. So how do we deal with this when we're dealing with substance use? How do we make this not be the precursor to substance use? And so I would challenge all of you to think about that and to think about those kind of issues. Okay? All right, some other sexual consequences of alcohol and drugs. And we'll go on and we'll finish with this today. And I think this will wrap us up. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about sexuality and sexual drive, loss of sexual drive, sex with strangers, sexuality out of control, sexual obsession and preoccupation, risk of AIDS, and through sexual behavior. So let me kind of summarize all of these bullet points. Okay, loss of sexual drive, especially when we're using things like cocaine, heroin, um, methamphetamine. Okay, those drugs. So if we were perfectly sober, if we never use an excitatory or exhilatory substance, the most natural way that we could achieve the highest level of dopamine, meaning how can we make our brain being so stimulated by dopamine that we're just in this euphoric happy stage? Okay, that would be through a sexual orgasm. If we're naturally and completely sober, that is the only way that we can elevate our dopamine levels to the highest level. Okay, so let's take that on the perfectly sober individual and let's use methamphetamine as the example. Methamphetamine as a drug quadruples the amount of dopamine in the brain as does a natural sexual orgasm. So if you want to think about it in this way, and this is the highest level, and then cocaine triples it, heroin almost is between cocaine and heroin, alcohol suppresses it. So alcohol, the depressants suppress our sexual drive, so we can't even achieve stimulation on a natural level. So all of these substances either suppress it below the natural level or triple it or contriple it. Okay. 4 times, 8 times, 6 times. Okay. And this is why a lot of people who are chronic cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine users cannot have a sexual orgasm unless they are on high on the drug that they're using, because the dopamine levels don't achieve that level. People on alcohol, people who are on the depressant end, they're only able to achieve a sober level of dopamine. meaning that an orgasm for someone on alcohol is like being sober. It's like, oh, sober normal. They're not even achieving sober orgasm level. I know this is a little bit explicit. I hope no one has kids around, but that's a loss of sex drive. Okay. Sex with strangers often has to deal with the loss of inhibition when we're using depressants. And so we're more likely to engage in high risk sexual activities. On the stimulant end, it deals with the same issue, trying to achieve that next high, or especially on the stimulant level, sex with stranger means I can purchase my next high. Sexuality out of control. This is an issue that we need to address because when we're dealing with dual diagnosis individuals, when we're dealing with dual diagnosis individuals, the individuals that I'm thinking of is individuals that are suffering from sexual abuse and sexual exploitation, domestic violence, um, because they can have two levels of sexuality. Okay. What we often see with sexual survivors and domestic survivors is that they go to one of two ends. Either they become completely asexual, which means they just are disgusted by sex, or they become hypersexual, meaning that they tend to have sex with multiple partners and over time. And so when we're dealing with alcohol and drugs and sexuality out of control, we have to look at the hypo and the hyper end of sexuality. I saw someone's hand up.
That was me. I had a question. Could this also be if a female was expecting and during while she was expecting she was actively using drugs and alcohol, could this affect the unborn kid? Could they have the asexual and out of control sexual desires as a result?
Brittany, that's actually an excellent question about prenatal pre exposure to drugs and alcohol and everything else. Because what we do know is that the mother's level of tolerance tends to be passed on to the infant. And this is the struggle with addiction and its heritability, right?
Yeah.
But we also have to realize that the consequences of that heritability is also passed on to that child. So if that child, for example, if we have a hypersexual person, a mom, that is not hypersexual unless she's on that drug, the likelihood that she is born to a child that is also hypersexual but does not have that drug induced into that child to produce it, that increases the probability that that child will also be a drug abuser to seek out that hypersexuality. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So that's the issue with especially with pregnancy and motherhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, and so when we deal with going back on this, when we're dealing with the sexuality of and we look at the hypersexuality, sexual obsession and preoccupation tends to be that other thing. Because again, our natural body stimulation, if cocaine boosted my dopamine levels, and I know my body can produce overproduction of dopamine, so then I can become obsessed or preoccupied with those things that produce somewhat of that pseudo effect that the drug does. Okay. And of course, that then put us at risk of AIDS. It puts us at risk of sexually transmitted diseases and all of those things. So we got to keep those things in mind. Okay. So let's really quickly talk about some of the relationships and social consequences of alcohol and drug use. And then we'll wrap up for today. And I think we're caught up to where we can have our Thursday off and we can enjoy some of the ton awesome things, or you can catch up and have a happy fall break. But let's talk about some of the consequences. So obviously, arguments with spouses or mates. Now, I want to talk about this in consequences of a singular person in addiction versus both of them. Okay, so let's say we have one person who's an alcoholic and the other is not. We could probably already produce the arguments that would be aroused, and that is stereotypically what we think about when we think about spouses and mates in an addiction a relationship. But I want to take this a step further, okay? Because both research and my clinical experience has shown that when both partners are in the addictive process, they're both users, alcohol, drugs, marijuana, whatever it may be, that when both partners are in that same cycle, you would think it was harmonious, but it actually accelerates violence, domestic violence, hurt, pain, because of in both of those individual brains, even though they're at the same level of inebriation, they're both going through the same levels of paranoia, of doubt, of worthlessness, of how do I get my next high? Can I rely on this person who wants the same thing I want? Can I trust them to give me the same thing that they're getting? And it creates actually more, and they also become users. They reinforce each other's use. This time we won't get in an argument. This time we won't get mad with each other. This time it will be okay. All right. And so arguments between spouses or mates, we often think about between a non-user spouse and a user spouse. But it becomes much worse when both are users. Thrown out of the household, again, it comes to both. A loss of friends, arguments with parents, brothers and sisters, spouses or mates has threatened to leave or has already left, and social isolation. And I want to make this kind of an emphasis because many of you know that my main area of study is loneliness and social isolation. All right. And drug abusers feel like anyone who is a threat to their use is not someone that they need in their life. And so it comes down to this such an isolated phase where it may just be them. It may just be them and their little gang of users. It may just be them. I remember one time at the beginning of this young man's use, he had a whole bunch of friends and he went and he partied and he had, gosh, 10, 20 friends. And then as the use because of trauma and other issues. I will admit that. He went from 10 to 20 to 15 and then 10. The last time I interacted with this young man, he was sitting at a McDonald's talking to me on the phone because all of his friends said, "We're done with you." He couldn't go back to his family's house because they all had given up on him. He couldn't go to grandparents or distant family because they all had heard the rumors, and his closest friends finally said, "We're done." And so he ended up, I think it was a McDonald's or Burger King or something like this. And he was on the phone with a distant relative, someone that was different from the political views of his family and his friends and everyone else. And that person came to me and said, "What should I do? I have this person on my phone, um, and they've and I don't know what to do with that person." And that is the social isolation example that I think is important. That um, at the end of addiction, a person can come so desperate that they'll go against everything that they believe and they'll call out to a person who has such a different belief that they do and ask for help. And I always come back to this thing that I learned in prison, where people come to prison and they find something different because they couldn't find it on the outside. Because they're at that point where there is no one. And that is the end of addiction. And I think that's the end mark of all of these things. All right. And then we could go through the financial issues, loss of job, productivity, debt. I know one of the addicts I worked with couldn't, they had a good, decent paycheck, but they were paying so much money in alcohol each and every night that they weren't even meeting their rent or their electricity. And they were putting a lot of things on credit cards, even though they were being paid a wage that was well beyond what I think any of us, I wish I would have had his money, because I wouldn't be so stressed about my finances. But he was totally out of control. He had no money. He was homeless, but he was bringing in. I'll bring up this amount. The last paycheck stub he sent me for 1 week's worth of work was $12,000, but he spent that before it even began. Yes, Katie, I have experienced this. I probably spent $4,000 in alcohol alone. Yes, Katie, that's a perfect example. And thank you for being able to state that. So think about these things. Even when we deal with people, when we say drug and alcohol people are always homeless, that doesn't mean that they're poor. They could probably have a lot of financial assets available to them if it wasn't for their use. Okay? And I applaud Katie for stating that, and thank you for that. All right. Legal consequences, we'll get more into those later on. We'll deal with this a little bit more. We'll deal with the suicide issues a little bit more. Okay. All right. I think we're at the end. All right. So yes, later in this semester, we will be talking about the connection between suicide prevention and substance use. We will bring that up and we'll get more into detail about that. But I do want to open up the conversation. All right, with everything that we've talked about, how are we all feeling? Do we feel like we're in a good position to start looking at these prevention programs that have been developed and looked at, to look at them from a critical eye starting when we come back from fall break? Are we ready to really take a close look at some of these prevention programs and intervention programs? Give me a yes, a no, a thumbs up, unmute yourself. I see Jamie doing her thumbs up in her video. Are we good? Thank you. Yes. I love the video. Thumbs up. Okay, we're all good. All right, so we're going to come back from fall break and we're going to start analyzing some of these prevention programs to see how they've worked, how they've not worked, and how we can maybe improve them. I'm hoping by the end of the semester that you guys have your own ideas about how you could help this in your own communities and figure these problems out, because they are important. But for now, Thursday, either come to campus and take advantage of the on-campus events for culture. Otherwise, make sure you're ready for fall break and get stuff done this coming Thursday. But take care of yourselves, take care of your family. Thank you for coming to class. And I appreciate every single one of you. Have a good evening. Have a good fall break.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.